Cool, thank you. Okay, so my name is Madalina Vlasceanu. I'm a new assistant professor here in the psychology department at NYU in the social program. And I'm the director of the NYU Collective Cognition Lab. You can see a picture of current lab members here on the screen. So I was really excited when Emily reached out and had me introduce the lab to all of you, potentially to see if you'd be interested in our lab and to see whether there's points of connection. So I'll give a brief overview of what our lab is interested in, and then I'll take as many questions as you have. So the mission of our lab is to primarily understand how individual cognition, for example, processes such as memory, belief system dynamics, decision-making, manifest perhaps unexpectedly when individuals find themselves in communities rather than in isolation. So let me give you an example to make this pretty theoretical idea more intuitive. So think about the emotion you experience when you watch an emotional video and you're by yourself, versus the emotional experience you have when you witness that same stimulus, but this time you're in an auditorium full of other people attending to that same information, to that same stimulus. So research shows that emotional experiences triggered by the same event in these two different contexts are very different. So when you're surrounded by others, your emotions are amplified. What you remember is slightly different and contingent on who you're with. And even how you behave can be different, what you're capable of can be different. So this emotional example is just one way in which our individual minds differ when we're surrounded by others, but we don't just think about it in terms of emotions, we think about it in terms of how our memories differ, how our behaviors differ in different contexts. So this idea that the collective can be truly different from the sum of individual capabilities, this is not unique to human cognition. In fact, I think it's more interesting in animals. For example, ants can collectively solve problems way better than when they work in isolation. So some of these same principles that communities of ants use when they try to figure out how to solve a problem, for example, how to cross this bridge, to create a bridge in this image, to cross between the two surfaces. Some of these same collective principles that can lead ants to solve these problems can also lead the ants, for example, to a catastrophic outcome instead. So each individual ant in both of these examples actually follow the same principle, follow the ant in front of you. But in these different contexts, in one example, the ants achieve a great bridge and they solve the problem, and in the other example, depending on the environment, they go in this death spiral and they can starve themselves. So I think it's quite similar for communities of people, because our collective cognition is what has allowed us to achieve such amazing accomplishments. Here's a bridge that people built, for example, to parallel completely what my ant example was. But I think research has also shown that these same principles can also lead to humans' own destruction if we're not careful. And so our lab is thinking about what are some ways and strategies and interventions to have people stay away from these death spirals in society and go more towards the positive social change that we would all benefit from. So here are a couple of concrete applications that we think about in the lab. So we do a lot of work in trying to address misinformation. So what are some strategies to reduce misinformation, both in real conversation as well as online? So for example, we know that 1/3 of American parents falsely believe that vaccines cause autism. And maybe for one given person, this may not be a huge deal, but at the collective level, it can actually lead to dramatic increases in premature deaths and in disease spread. So this is a serious issue that we need to address. We are also interested in strategies of reducing societal inequality. So for example, gender inequality around the world, which we know it's currently amplified by online algorithms and climate change. So we are thinking about strategies of decreasing that. And then finally, we think a lot about ways in which psychological science can contribute to the climate crisis response. So in this domain, we want to get people around the world to understand the emergency we are in, and take meaningful action. And so I would say most of our work is actually situated in this context, given the scale of the crisis and the urgency with which we need to mobilize against it at a collective level. So the climate crisis is actually the perfect application of our theoretical interests, given that this is a collective problem in need of collective solutions. So also, what we know is that the current barriers to addressing this crisis are actually not technological or financial anymore. The barriers are primarily psychological and political. So our lab is investigating psychological strategies to tackle these primary barriers to climate solutions. So what is a concrete step we can take towards addressing this crisis? So this is where psychology comes in, and we have noted that really one of the only ways in which we can tackle climate change is to pass laws that would stop fossil fuel production and incentivize the transition to clean energy instead. But this political shift has been suggested to only be able to happen if enough pressure is put on lawmakers through peaceful demonstrations. And so we now can ask, how do you get people to care enough to go out and march? And this is one of the things that we can ask in this context. And specifically, there are many ways of conveying the science behind climate change. And we can ask, what is the most conducive framing in which you can observe the most action? So this is where some of our research is situated. So in this example, we can ask, what is the best way to talk about climate change? And research has shown that, maybe the best way to do it is emphasize social norms, because that's what will get people to adopt sustainable behavior the most. But there's other strategies. For example, you can talk about scientific consensus, and this has been found also to increase pro-environmental behavior. Or you can talk about the consequences of climate change in this doom and gloom messaging style that some journalists employ. So which one works best? This is the kind of questions we ask in the lab. And we do much more that I don't have time to go into now, but I'm happy to chat more in the Q&A or offline if you email me. So you can read all about this work on our website, which you can go to if you use this QR code, or if you just Google Collective Cognition NYU. Thanks.